You catch it before a single drop touches the ground. The feeders clear out. Your yard, which 10 minutes earlier had 2 cardinals picking through sunflower seeds and a nuthatch walking headfirst down the side of the oak, goes quiet in a way that feels different. Not peaceful quiet, different quiet. The birds are gone. Then the rain starts, and like most people, you figure they went to wait it out somewhere, under a branch, behind some leaves, somewhere dry and protected until it passes. But what actually goes on with your birds during a rainstorm is one of the most misunderstood things happening in your backyard, and it isn't simple. It isn't the same story for every bird out there. And in certain cases, what your birds actually do when it rains is the complete opposite of what your gut tells you. What you're about to learn plays out dozens of times every single year in your yard. Every time the sky turns gray, every time the air feels heavy, every time the light shifts in that particular way it shifts before a storm. You've been seeing the opening of this for years. You've never seen the rest of it. Hit subscribe before we go any further, because what unfolds in your yard when it rains touches physiology, behavior, and decision-making that researchers have only started to fully understand in recent years. Stick around to the end, because the last thing we talk about is something almost nobody who watches birds ever stops to consider. And once you get it, the next rainy morning you spend at your window will feel like a completely different experience. Today, we're going into the rain, into what your birds actually do when it falls. Number 1, your birds know the rain is coming before you do, and the way they know should genuinely stop you. There's a reason those feeders empty out before the storm rolls in. It isn't coincidence. It isn't some accident of timing. It's biology running at a level of sensitivity that no weather app on your phone can touch. Birds carry a sensory system that humans simply don't have. Sitting inside the inner ear and in specialized pressure receptors distributed throughout the body, this system reads changes in barometric pressure with remarkable precision. When a storm system starts pushing toward your area, atmospheric pressure drops measurably, sometimes hours before the first cloud shows up over your house. Your birds feel that drop the moment it starts, and they respond to it deliberately. Research out of the University of Minnesota, tracking weather patterns alongside feeder activity, found that bird feeding behavior surged sharply in the hours before major rain events. Not after, not during, before. Birds ramp up their feeding rate because they're packing in calories ahead of a stretch when feeding will be hard or impossible. They're not reacting to rain, they're preparing for it. That's why your feeders are at their busiest in that narrow window of cool, gray, slightly strange-feeling air that settles in before a storm. The light is off, the pressure is dropping, and your birds are eating like they know exactly what's about to happen, because they do. The ruby-throated hummingbird can pick up barometric pressure shifts small enough that researchers in some field studies actually use hummingbird behavior as a proxy measurement. A hummingbird that normally visits your feeder every 15 minutes or so will shift to continuous feeding in the hour before significant rain. It's burning through its caloric reserves and replacing them in real time before the window closes and the insects it depends on disappear entirely. Here's what this tells you practically. The next time your feeders go suddenly, almost frantically busy and you can't figure out why, pull up your forecast. You will almost certainly find rain coming in the next few hours. Your birds already know. You just found out later. Number 2, what happens to feathers in the rain and why it matters more than most people ever realize. Most people picture birds getting wet and miserable in the rain the way a soaked dog looks, drenched, cold, heavy. That's not what's happening. The reality is more complicated, more species-specific, and in certain conditions, more genuinely dangerous. Bird feathers aren't waterproof the way a rain jacket is waterproof. They're water-resistant in a far more nuanced way. The outer contour feathers on most songbirds are coated in oils that come from the uropygial gland, a small structure at the base of the tail that birds preen from constantly.
When a bird pulls its bill along its feathers during preening, it's distributing that oil and maintaining a precise physical structure in the feather barbules that makes water bead up and run off rather than soak in. In light rain, that works well. In heavy, sustained rain, it starts to break down. Once the outer feathers get saturated, the insulating layer of down underneath, the layer that traps warm air and keeps the bird at operating temperature, loses its structure, and along with it, its ability to function. A bird with compromised insulation stuck out in cold rain is in real physiological danger. Heat loss speeds up. Energy demands spike fast. A small bird, a chickadee, a kinglet, a wren, can move toward dangerous hypothermia not over hours, but in minutes under the wrong conditions. This is why rain behavior isn't passive, it's urgent. What your birds do in heavy, sustained rain is move into cover and stay there. Dense shrubs, thick canopied conifers, brush piles, the deep interior of a leafy tree where the canopy catches the rain before it ever reaches the bird. They turn their backs to the wind, cutting down the surface area they're exposing. They compress their feathers in a specific way that sheds water more efficiently than relaxed plumage. A bird hunkered down in rain looks noticeably smaller than normal. That compression is intentional. Here's what this means for the way you think about your yard. The shrubs, brush piles, and dense hedges you've got out there aren't decorative. On a cold November afternoon when the rain won't quit, they are the difference between a bird that makes it through the afternoon and one that doesn't. Number 3. The birds that don't stop in the rain and what that behavior actually tells you. Here's where the story gets interesting, because not every bird takes cover, and the ones that don't are doing something that reveals a level of weather-adapted behavior that genuinely surprises most people when they first learn about it. The American robin is one of the clearest examples. You've probably seen it. Rain falling steadily, the yard empty, the feeders abandoned, and there's a robin on the lawn completely unbothered, pulling earthworms with that same calm efficiency it brings to any other morning. That's not indifference, that's strategy. Rain drives earthworms to the surface. The exact mechanism is still debated in the scientific literature. Some researchers point to ground vibration, others point to soil saturation, others to changes in underground oxygen levels, but the result is consistent and exploitable. When it rains, worms come up. Robins, which find prey primarily by sight and by vibration cues they pick up through their feet, suddenly have access to a food source that's dramatically more concentrated and available than at any other time. The robin's feather structure handles wet conditions relatively well. Its larger body size gives it a better surface area to volume ratio than smaller birds, meaning it sheds heat more slowly. It can work through moderate rain without paying much physiological cost. What you're watching when you see a robin out there in the rain is not a bird that forgot to take shelter. You're watching a bird that has run the numbers, weighed the cost of being wet against the benefit of the food, and decided the math works out in its favor. House sparrows make a similar kind of calculation around feeders. In light to moderate rain, house sparrows are often the last birds standing at a covered feeder station. They press into the dry zone just under the roof edge of a hopper feeder and keep eating through conditions that have driven every other species away. They're exploiting the cleared competition. Number 4. What your birds are actually doing with their time when the rain is heavy and the yard looks completely still. The birds sheltering in your yard during a sustained heavy rain aren't just sitting there waiting. They're doing things that reveal the full depth of what a small wild animal does when its normal activity is cut off. Preening is the main behavior, and that's not incidental, it's deliberate and essential. During rain, birds preen continuously. They're managing the structural integrity of every single feather in a process that requires individual attention to individual feather tracts. The bill works through the barbs of each feather, realigning the interlocking barbules that give the feather both its aerodynamic properties and its insulating function. Ornithologists at the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds found that garden birds in the UK spent significantly more time preening during and immediately following rain events compared to dry weather. This isn't comfort grooming, it's maintenance that determines whether the bird can fly properly and regulate its temperature. A bird with structurally damaged feathers can't fly at full efficiency, can't thermoregulate properly, can't function at the level a wild animal needs to function to stay alive. Preening isn't downtime, it's work. During heavy, sustained rain, birds also go into what researchers call passive thermoregulation. They tuck one leg up into the body feathers, cutting heat loss from the limbs. They orient themselves to minimize their exposure to wind and rain. During very long events, some birds may enter a light torpor, dialing down their metabolic rate to stretch their energy reserves. A bird sitting motionless in a dense shrub during a rainstorm isn't bored or uncomfortable. It's running a sophisticated energy management strategy, burning as little fuel as possible while staying ready to move the instant conditions change. What this means for the way you watch your yard is this. An empty, still, rain-soaked yard is not actually empty. It's full of birds you cannot see, pressed into cover, preening, managing their temperature, waiting with a precision and patience that no amount of discomfort interrupts. They're a few feet from where they always are. You just can't see them. Number 5. The first 10 minutes after rain stops and why you should be watching. This is the part most people miss. This is the part worth setting a timer for. When the rain stops, your yard does not ease back to normal. What happens in the first 10 minutes after a rain event ends is one of the most activity-dense windows in an entire day of backyard bird behavior. The birds come back fast, they come back hungry, and they come back in an order that lays out the social hierarchy at your feeder with unusual clarity, because the competition is at its most intense right after rain. Reserves have been drawn down, insects are suddenly accessible, worms are still on the surface, the window is short before the sun pushes them back underground, and the birds that couldn't get to your feeder during the rain need it urgently right now. The first birds back after rain are almost always the dominant individuals of each species, the male cardinal before the female, the top-ranking chickadee before the ones lower in the pecking order, the blue jay before everything else at the platform feeder. Within 2 to 3 minutes, the full social structure of your feeder reassembles itself at fast-forward speed. But something else happens in the post-rain window that has nothing to do with the feeder. Your lawn and garden beds become temporarily extraordinary foraging environments. The rain has moved invertebrates. Insects that were sheltering under leaves or tucked into soil crevices are displaced and exposed. Robins work fast through wet grass. Starlings move through open areas in that forward-leaning, probing walk. Thrushes, if they're in your area, may show up at the garden edge. Cornell Lab of Ornithology's eBird data shows that bird sightings and species diversity in residential yards spike sharply in the hour following rain events. More species visible, more activity, more observable behavior than at almost any other moment in the day. If you want to see your yard at its most alive, wait for rain to stop and then stand at your window. The 10 minutes that follow are worth more to you than almost any other 10 minutes you could spend watching.
Number 6. What rain reveals about your birds that clear days hide. There's a final piece here that most people never put together, and it's the reason I saved it for last. Rain changes what you can actually see. It strips the yard down to its essentials. The birds that stay, the ones that come back first, the ones that press into specific spots in your yard while the storm passes. All of it reveals something about your yard that dry days keep hidden.
Where your birds go in rain tells you exactly which structures in your yard they trust. The holly bush a cardinal disappears into the moment rain starts isn't just a plant, it's a roosting site, a shelter site, a survival site, one that a specific bird has evaluated and committed to. The dense arborvitae in the corner of your yard, the brush pile you've been meaning to haul away, the thick inner branches of your old spruce. These are the bones of your bird's survival infrastructure, and rain makes them visible in a way that sunny weather simply doesn't. Research from the British Trust for Ornithology studying garden bird behavior during weather events found that birds return to the same shelter sites across multiple rain events, sometimes to a specific branch or a specific cavity entrance, building a map of reliable refuges that they update and sharpen over years. The birds in your yard know every dense shrub, every sheltered overhang, every protected cavity with a precision you've probably never given them full credit for. They know your yard better than you do. Rain is one of the few moments you actually get to see some of what they know. The feeders go empty, the branches go still. The yard closes down in that particular gray way that only rain brings. You stand at the window looking at what seems like nothing, a yard that seems like it's emptied out completely. But you know now what's actually happening out there. A cardinal is pressed deep into the holly, feathers compressed, turned to the wind, preening in that slow and deliberate way while the rain comes straight down. A chickadee is in the woodpecker hole in the oak, already dropping into a mild torpor, conserving fuel, waiting. A robin is on the back lawn, soaking wet, completely unbothered, working the worms. The yard didn't empty, it reorganized itself around the rain, around survival, around the structures and the maps and the calculations your birds carry inside their bodies and their memories every single day. And in 10 minutes or 30 or whenever the pressure shifts and the light changes and your birds feel what you won't see for another hour when the clouds finally start to break, they'll be back to the feeder, back to the branches, back to the lawn. Fast at first, hungry. And if you're watching, you'll catch it. Tell me in the comments, have you ever watched your yard in the first few minutes after a heavy rain? What did you see? I want to hear it. Those observations are some of the most detailed and genuinely interesting things this community shares. I read every one. I'll see you in the next one.